we have some truly heartbreaking news from the world of rock and roll. The legendary Ozzy Osbourne, the unapologetic godfather of heavy metal, has passed away. The news has sent a shockwave of grief through the music community, but perhaps no. One is feeling this loss more than his lifelong friend and Black Sabbath co-founder, Tony Iommi. It's a moment that somehow feels both inevitable and completely impossible. The final silence from a voice that roared for generations. The world is mourning a cultural icon who sold over 100 million albums. But for the man who stood by his side for more than 50 years, this is a pain that goes far beyond the music. It's a personal devastation that cuts right to the bone. Is the story of that profound loss, of one last heroic performance, and of a friendship that forged the very sound of heavy metal. The news of Ozzy Osbourne's passing on July 22, 2025, just 17 days after a triumphant final performance, has left the world reeling. For Tony Iommi, the architect of Black Sabbath's sound, the grief was reportedly sharpened by a chilling and poignant detail. A final text message from his friend, received just the day before he died. It's a detail that transforms a public tragedy into an intensely personal story of shock. That final communication, a simple message about how tired he was, has become a haunting last testament to a friendship that endured decades of turmoil, success, and reunion. How do you even begin to process the loss of a brother, a collaborator, and a force of nature who, against all odds, seemed invincible? For Tony Iommi, that painful journey has just begun. When the news broke, it was a brutal, blindsiding blow. For Tony Iommi, hearing that Ozzy was gone wasn't just sad, it was something his mind simply couldn't accept. Friends said he was in a state of pure disbelief, repeating that it couldn't possibly be real. After all, he'd just gotten a text from him the day before. That single message has become a focal point of his shock, a digital ghost of a conversation that now feels a lifetime ago. In it, Ozzy had complained of being exhausted, of having no energy left, a sentiment that, in hindsight, carries a devastating weight. This profound sense of disorientation isn't something Iommi is navigating alone. He's been in close contact with Black Sabbath's bassist, Geezer Butler, who finds himself lost in the same sea of sorrow. The two surviving members of that original world-changing lineup are left to grapple with the void left by their frontman. It's a bond forged in the fires of their youth, a brotherhood that defined a genre. To lose one of their own isn't just losing a friend. It's losing a part of themselves. As Iommi has reportedly expressed, it's like losing a brother. The simple, daily habits of their long friendship now serve as painful reminders. The instinct to reach out to share a thought or a joke is still there, but the recipient is gone. It's a strange and recurring heartbreak, a fresh wave of grief each time the reality hits anew. Their friendship, like any epic story, had its share of conflict. There were years when they were, in Ozzy's own words, archenemies. The pressures of fame and creative differences led to Ozzy's firing from the band in 1979 and plenty of tension during reunion tours. Yet, in recent years especially, as Ozzy's health declined, that old animosity had completely melted away. It was replaced by a deep, unwavering affection. Iommi became one of Ozzy's most consistent sources of support, texting and calling regularly, a constant presence during his friend's darkest days. They had come full circle, from schoolyard pals to rivals, and finally two brothers in the truest sense. This final chapter, marked by so much mutual support and love, makes the sudden ending all the more devastating. You can't tell the story of Ozzy's final days without telling the story of his final performance. The two are forever linked, a testament to a will of iron that refused to be silenced by a body in rebellion. For years, Ozzy was locked in a grueling public battle with his health. A 2019 fall at home had been catastrophic, dislodging metal rods in his spine from a near-fatal ATV accident years earlier. This led to a cascade of health crises and multiple complex surgeries that left him in chronic pain. Then, in January 2020, came the Parkinson's diagnosis. The world watched as the Prince of Darkness, man famous for his manic energy, fought a disorder that was stealing his mobility. Tours were canceled and the vibrant showman became increasingly confined. By early 2025, his wife Sharon confirmed he couldn't walk, a devastating reality for a man who commanded stages for nearly 6 decades. It was against this backdrop that the idea for one last show was born. It was an act of defiance. Sharon, always his champion, knew he needed a final mountain to climb. And so the Back to the Beginning concert was conceived, a massive one-day festival in his and Black Sabbath's hometown of Birmingham. In his own words, Ozzy said, "It's my time to go back to the beginning. Time for me to give back to the place where I was born." The concert was meant to be more than a farewell. It was billed as a historic reunion of the original Black Sabbath. The hope among fans was electric. Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, and original drummer Bill Ward would share a stage for the first time in over 20 years. Seeing the four of them together again was a moment many believed would never happen, a chance to heal old wounds for one last, glorious roar. During rehearsals, Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler watched their old friend with a mix of awe and concern. They saw the physical toll it was taking. Ozzy looked frail, weakened by his health battles. But they also saw that old fire, that unshakable determination. It seemed he was channeling every last ounce of his life force into this one single objective. Both Iommi and Butler later came to the same conclusion, a belief now solidified in the wake of his passing. He held on just to do that show. It wasn't just another concert. It was his mission. It was a titan, weakened but unbowed, preparing for a final stand on the very ground that made him. On July 5, 2025, the air at Villa Park in Birmingham was electric. 40,000 souls had gathered to witness history, with millions more tuned in globally. This was Back to the Beginning, an epic 10-0 event featuring rock royalty like Metallica and Guns N' Roses, all there to pay tribute. The night was a pilgrimage, a celebration, and above all, a farewell. Then the moment arrived. A figure ascended onto the stage, seated on a massive Gothic throne fit for rock royalty. It was a stunning contrast. The throne, a symbol of his status. His seated posture, a stark reminder of his battle. Dressed in signature black, Ozzy looked every bit the icon. He leaned into the mic, his voice weathered but unmistakably Ozzy. "You ready?" he roared. "Let the madness begin." Yeah. Opened with a set of his solo masterpieces, from Mr. Crowley to the anthem that could make any stadium erupt, Crazy Train. Though he remained seated, his spirit soared. He conducted the crowd with his hands, his head banging, visibly frustrated that he couldn't prowl the stage like he used to. As one fan put it, only Ozzy Osbourne could be in a chair, shaking from Parkinson's and remain the consummate showman. After a brief pause, the stage was set for the moment a generation of metal fans had awaited. Out walked Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler. The reunion, however, was not the full picture fans had hoped for. Bill Ward, due to the same long-standing issues that kept him from the band's previous The End tour, was not behind the kit. While his absence was a final bittersweet note, the sight of the three core members together was still powerful. They launched into War Pigs, its anti-war cry as potent as ever. Iommi's riff was monstrous. Geezer's bass rumbled. And at the center of it all was Ozzy's wail, cutting through the night. They tore through Iron Man, a cultural touchstone, and as Ozzy sang the lines, he was Iron Man, a hero battling his own demons. Finally, they came to the end. The last song Ozzy Osbourne would ever sing on a public stage, Paranoid. The frantic anthem whipped the crowd into one last frenzy. As the final chord rang out, the three men stood together. Ozzy, visibly moved, addressed the masses one last time. "You've no idea how I feel," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." A final wave, and it was over. The madness had ended. The echoes of Paranoid had barely faded from Villa Park, but the emotional gravity of the night continued backstage. After the monumental performance, an exhausted but elated Ozzy met with his bandmates. Reports from backstage paint a picture of quiet, personal goodbyes. It was in these moments, away from the roar of the crowd, that the depth of their renewed bond was most apparent. They weren't just Black Sabbath. They were Tony, Geezer, and Ozzy, old friends sharing a moment of triumph, reminiscing about the wild journey that had brought them back together. In the 17 days that followed, it felt as though Ozzy, having said his epic goodbye to the fans, had finally given his body permission to rest. Iommi and Butler would later reflect that he had poured every last reserve of his strength into that one night. It was as if he knew, on some level, that this was it. Then, on the morning of July 22, 2025, the world received the news it had long dreaded. A statement from his family confirmed the heartbreaking reality. "It is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we have to report that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning," it read. He was with his family and surrounded by love. He passed away peacefully at his home in England, a final return to the country where his story began. He was surrounded by the people who knew him, not as a rock god, but as a husband, a father, and papa to his grandchildren. His daughter Kelly shared a poignant line from their duet changes. "I feel unhappy. I am so sad. I lost the best friend I ever had." It was a sentiment felt by millions, but most acutely by those who loved him most. The juxtaposition was staggering. Less than 3 weeks earlier, he was a king on his throne. Now he was gone. Ozzy Osbourne's music and spirit touched millions. From Black Sabbath to his incredible solo career, his voice was the soundtrack for generations. We encourage you to share your memories in the comments below. What did Ozzy's music mean to you? What is your favorite song or concert memory? Let's turn this space into a tribute to the man, the myth, the legend. Rock and roll will never be the same. How do you measure the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne? He was more than a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon, a self-styled Prince of Darkness who somehow became one of music's most beloved figures. His journey was a paradox. A working-class kid who became rock royalty, a figure of controversy who became a reality TV dad, and a man who flirted with darkness but was known for his kindness and humor. Musically, his impact is incalculable. As the frontman of Black Sabbath, he stood at the epicenter of heavy metal's creation. When he was fired from the band he helped build, he launched one of the most successful solo careers in rock history, ultimately selling over 100 million records. The outpouring of tributes from peers like Elton John and Metallica confirms his status. There was Ozzy, and then there was everyone else. As Alice Cooper aptly put it, he was an unmatched showman and cultural icon. But for Tony Iommi, the legacy is far more personal. It's the memory of an unpredictable, funny, and utterly unique human being he'd known since they were schoolboys. "There's not another Ozzy," Iommi reportedly said. A simple truth that holds a universe of meaning. In the end, Ozzy's story is one of survival. He survived poverty, prison, addiction, and debilitating health issues, cheating death so many times. He seemed immortal, but his greatest survival is his music. That will live forever. The final text from Ozzy to Tony, a simple admission of fatigue, now feels like a quiet farewell from one brother to another. While the world mourns an icon, Tony Iommi mourns the silence where his friend's voice used to be. But he also holds the memory of that final triumphant shoe-on night when a titan stood tall one last time, proving that the music they created is more powerful than any frailty, any illness, or even death itself. Ozzy is gone, but the madness he began will never end. Ozzy forever.